Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I remember the night clearly, as though it happened only yesterday. The street outside my home was quiet, bathed in the kind of orange glow that only the old lampposts in small neighborhoods can cast. I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at a half-empty cup of tea, when he called me. His voice carried that calmness he always seemed to have, like he could steady a storm simply by speaking. And that night, his words were simple: I need you to trust me. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Trust him with what? We'd known each other for a while, long enough for me to consider him dependable, yet not so long that I could say I knew every layer of him. I suppose that's what drew me in, the mystery of someone who always gave just enough, but never too much. I stepped outside with my coat pulled tightly around me. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth after the rain. I found him standing near the edge of my driveway, his shoulders hunched as though the world weighed heavy on them. The shadows painted his face in half-light, making his eyes unreadable. When I approached, he turned to me slowly, and there was a heaviness there, something unspoken but urgent. I need you to come with me, he said softly. But you have to trust me. Please. I hesitated. My mind spun with questions, 1,000 reasons to say no, yet my heart beat with a rhythm that pulled me forward. There's something unsettling about handing someone else the reins of your own choices, but in that moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that stepping into the unknown with him would lead to something meaningful. He led me to his car, an older sedan that rattled slightly when it started. The inside smelled faintly of leather and pine, like he had tried to keep it warm and familiar despite its age. The drive was quiet, except for the steady hum of the engine and the occasional sound of his breath when he exhaled slowly. He didn't explain where we were going, and I didn't press him. Instead, I studied the way his hands gripped the wheel, firm, yet careful, like a man who understood the weight of responsibility. After what felt like an eternity, he pulled into a narrow road I had never noticed before, tucked away behind rows of oak trees that arched over us like a tunnel. The branches whispered against the car roof, and the headlights carved a narrow path through the dark. My curiosity began to shift into unease, though I tried not to let it show. Trust, I reminded myself. I promised him trust. When we stopped, I saw it, an old wooden cabin, small and worn, with smoke curling faintly from the chimney. It looked almost abandoned, but the soft glow of light spilling through the cracks in the shutters said otherwise. He turned off the engine, and for the first time that night, he looked at me directly. His eyes carried both reassurance and sorrow, and I wasn't sure which one I should believe. I brought you here because there's something I need to share with you, he said quietly. Something I couldn't say anywhere else. My chest tightened. The night around us felt thick, like it was holding its breath. I wanted to ask why me, why now, why here, but his expression silenced every question. We stepped inside the cabin, and the warmth of the fire instantly wrapped around us. The place smelled of cedarwood and faintly of herbs, like it had been tended by someone who cared deeply for it. The furniture was old but sturdy, and the shelves were lined with books that looked as though they had been read 100 times over. It didn't feel like a stranger's place, it felt lived in, familiar in an odd way. He motioned for me to sit, and I lowered myself into an armchair near the fire. He stood for a long moment, pacing as though searching for the right words. Then, finally, he said, I asked you to trust me because I need you to hear the truth. And it might change how you see me forever. My stomach sank. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to mask it. I braced myself, but I didn't interrupt him. He told me a story, not about me, but about him. About the mistakes he had made years ago, the choices that haunted him, the people he felt he had failed. As he spoke, his words painted pictures of loss and regret, but also of resilience and quiet strength. He didn't spare himself from blame, nor did he beg for my sympathy. He simply laid it bare, like an offering. I listened, each word sinking deeper than I expected. There were moments when I wanted to reach for him, to ease the weight he carried, but something in me held back. This was his burden, and he needed to share it fully, without interruption. By the time he finished, the fire had burned lower, its glow casting long, tired shadows on the walls. He finally sat down across from me, his hands clasped together, waiting for my response. I didn't know what to say. I felt both honored that he had trusted me with his truth, and shaken by the heaviness of it. Trusting him had brought me here, into a night I could never forget. But as I sat in that chair, I began to wonder if I had been ready for the truth he carried, or if giving him my trust so freely would be something I would regret. I met his eyes across the flickering firelight, and in that silence, I knew this night would mark me forever. The silence after his confession was heavier than the words themselves. I could hear the crackle of the fire, the faint ticking of an old clock on the wall, and the sound of his breathing, steady, but strained, like each inhale carried the weight of years he had kept hidden. My hands rested on my lap, but I could feel them trembling ever so slightly, betraying the storm inside me. He had trusted me enough to tell me everything. But what he revealed wasn't just a story from his past, it was a shadow that still clung to him, shaping every decision he made, every glance, every hesitation. I thought I knew him. I thought I had built an image of who he was, strong and reliable, someone I could lean on. But that image cracked with every detail he shared, leaving me staring at someone I wasn't sure I recognized anymore. "You must hate me now," he said suddenly, his voice rough, almost breaking. He kept his gaze fixed on the fire, unwilling to look at me. "I don't," I whispered before I even realized the words had left my mouth. "But I don't know how to feel." He nodded slowly, as though he expected nothing less. "I told you because I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I didn't want to build something with you on a lie. If I asked for your trust, I had to earn it with truth." The way he said it, so certain, so final, sent a chill through me. Part of me admired his honesty, but another part recoiled from it. Some truths are heavier than silence, and once spoken, they can't be undone. We sat there for what felt like hours, each lost in our thoughts. The fire burned lower, the room dimmer, yet neither of us moved. Finally, I stood, my knees unsteady, and walked to the small window. Outside, the trees swayed gently, their branches scratching against the glass like whispers from the night. I pressed my hand against the cold pane, grounding myself, searching for clarity in the quiet darkness. "I don't know what you expect me to do with this," I said softly, not turning around. "I don't expect anything," he answered. "I just needed you to know. Whatever you decide after tonight, that's yours to choose." His words unsettled me even more than his story. Freedom, yes, but freedom laced with the burden of knowledge. I couldn't go back to who I was before I knew, before he pulled me into this part of his life. And though he gave me a choice, it didn't feel like one. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that whichever way I moved, I would fall. When I finally turned, I saw him slouched in the chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He looked older in that moment, not by years, but by the weight of everything he carried. I wondered how many nights he had sat here alone with these thoughts, and why, out of all people, he had chosen me to share them with. I should have left then. I should have gathered my things, thanked him for his honesty, and walked away before the regret grew roots inside me. But something kept me there. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something more complicated, a pull I couldn't name but couldn't resist either. So I stayed. He rose from his chair and moved to the bookshelf, pulling out a worn journal bound in faded leather. He handed it to me without a word. My fingers brushed against his as I took it, and for the briefest second, I saw the man he wanted to be, the one who longed for redemption, who wanted to be understood. "This is everything," he said. "More than I could tell you in one night. Read it, and then you'll truly know." I looked down at the journal, its edges frayed, its cover softened by years of being held. It felt alive in my hands, like it carried not just his past, but his very essence. My heart pounded as I realized that by opening it, I would step fully into his world. No going back. I wanted to ask him to take it back, to keep his secrets to himself. But the way he looked at me, so raw, so open, made the words die on my lips. Later that night, as I lay awake in the small bed he had offered me in the cabin, the journal rested on the nightstand beside me. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, painting silver streaks across its cover. I couldn't bring myself to open it yet, but I also couldn't take my eyes off it. Trust. That was the word he had asked of me. Trust him enough to listen, to stay, to learn. And I had. But as I stared at that journal, fear crept in, the fear that once I turned its pages, the regret I felt stirring in my chest would no longer be something I could silence. Sleep never came. Only questions. Only doubt. and the slow, dawning realization that my trust had already taken me further than I ever meant to go. The first light of dawn slipped through the thin curtains, pale and cold, brushing against my face and pulling me from the restless half-sleep I had fallen into. My eyes found the journal instantly. It hadn't moved from the nightstand, yet I felt its presence all night, like it was breathing quietly beside me. Its weight wasn't in the leather binding, it was in what it contained, in the truths waiting for me on every page. That I sat up slowly, the cabin creaking with the soft sounds of morning. He was nowhere to be seen, though faint clinks from the kitchen told me he was awake. I reached for the journal with hesitant hands, my fingertips grazing the worn cover. The leather was cracked, softened from years of use, as though it had been carried too often, opened too many times, each revisit wearing down its skin but not its heart. When I opened it, the smell of old paper and faint ink rose up, a scent both comforting and unnerving. The first page held only a single line, written in neat but firm handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means I have chosen to let you in." I paused, breathing deeply before turning the page. What followed wasn't a neat account of events, but a flood of memories pressed onto paper, stories of choices, failures, betrayals, and attempts at redemption. There were people I had never heard of, places I didn't know existed in his life, moments he had hidden behind the quiet, steady man I thought I knew. Each page peeled back another layer, and the more I read, the more the air seemed to grow heavier, as though the very walls of the cabin were pressing in on me with his past. There were mistakes, serious ones. Decisions that hurt others, choices made in weakness or desperation. He wrote about his shame, not with excuses, but with the kind of brutal honesty that made my chest tighten. He didn't paint himself as a hero or a victim. He was simply a man who had stumbled, again and again, and carried the echoes of those stumbles with him into every new day. At one point, I had to close the journal and press it against my chest, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I thought I had been ready for the truth, but I wasn't. Trusting him had seemed simple the night before, a word, a choice, a leap into the unknown. But reading his life in his own words made me realize how far that leap had carried me. I wasn't just standing at the edge of his world anymore. I was inside it. He appeared in the doorway then, holding 2 mugs of coffee. His eyes searched mine, quiet but sharp, as though he could see the storm behind them. Without speaking, he set 1 mug beside me and sat across from the bed, waiting. "I don't know what to say," I admitted finally, my voice breaking the silence. "You don't have to," he said softly. "Not yet." But I did feel I had to. Because the more I read, the more I wondered why he had chosen me. Why I was the one sitting in this cabin, holding his confessions in my hands. And beneath it all, a question that scared me even more: what was I supposed to do with it all? I asked him. And his answer was as unsettling as everything else. "Because you see me differently," he said. "Not as the man I was, not even as the man I am, but as someone who still has a chance to be more. That's why I needed your trust. Because without it, I'm just the sum of these pages." His words struck me harder than the stories themselves. He wasn't just confessing, he was placing something in my hands, something fragile and dangerous. Hope. And hope, I realized, was sometimes a heavier burden than regret. I spent most of that day in the cabin, alternating between reading and staring out the window at the trees that seemed to guard the place. Time blurred, the sun shifting slowly overhead, while he moved quietly around me, never pressing, never demanding a response. He let me sit with his truth, as though he knew it wasn't something I could digest quickly. By evening, when the light turned golden and the fire crackled once more, I had read enough to understand one thing clearly: I could never know what I knew now. His truth had become part of my story, whether I wanted it to or not. And with that realization came the first pang of regret, sharp and undeniable. I had trusted him, and he had given me honesty. But honesty is not light. It is not easy. It is a weight that sinks into your bones, making you question not only the other person, but yourself. When I finally looked up from the journal, his gaze was waiting for me. And in that moment, I knew the path ahead of us wasn't simple trust anymore. It was something far more complicated. Something that might change both of us forever. That night, after the journal closed for the last time, the silence between us shifted. It wasn't the heavy quiet of secrecy anymore, it was something rawer, exposed, impossible to hide. He sat across from me, his hands clasped tightly, as if he was bracing for whatever words might leave my mouth. I held the journal in my lap, my fingers curled around it, reluctant to let it go. "I trusted you," I finally whispered, my voice low but firm. "And now I don't know if I should regret that, or hold on to it." His eyes softened, though there was no relief in them. Only patience, only the calm endurance of a man who had lived with regret longer than I had known him. "Regret," he said quietly, "is not always the enemy. Sometimes it's the teacher." Those words sank into me more deeply than the stories themselves. I realized then that trust, given freely, was never safe. It was always a gamble. Sometimes it rewarded you with closeness, and other times it carved out a space inside you that ached with doubt. And I was standing in that space now, unsure which way the scale would tip. We didn't speak much after that. The fire burned low, the logs collapsing into soft embers. He drifted into silence, staring at the flames as though they held answers he hadn't yet found. I lay awake long into the night, the journal on the table beside me, its weight still pressing down on my heart. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay. Not because I didn't care, and not because I didn't understand, but because knowing his truth had changed me. And sometimes change isn't about staying and carrying another's burden. Sometimes it's about knowing when to step away, before the regret grows roots too deep to ever pull free. He seemed to sense it the moment I came into the room, coat in hand. He didn't ask me to stay. He didn't plead or argue. Instead, he walked me to the car, the cold morning air wrapping around us like a final embrace. "Whatever you decide," he said softly, "thank you for hearing me. That's more than most ever gave me." I nodded, unable to find words. My throat tightened as I opened the car door, the leather seat colder than I remembered. As I drove away, the cabin shrinking behind me, I realized I carried two things with me: his truth, and my own unease. 4 days afterward, I thought about that night. About trust, about honesty, about the thin line between connection and regret. I replayed his words in my mind, wondering if perhaps my regret wasn't about trusting him at all, but about trusting myself to be ready for the weight of what came with it. Because the truth is, trust doesn't always give you peace. Sometimes it gives you questions that follow you for years, shaping the way you see others, and yourself. And even now, as I tell you this, I can't give you a neat ending. There isn't one. Only a memory of firelight, of a journal full of truths, of a man who asked me to trust him, and of a woman who did. And whether I regret it or not, that answer still changes, depending on the day.